Hey guys, we got the cactus in the shot, but not the poster. Poster's off there. Oh, you can just barely see the poster. In case you think the cactus and the poster should be on camera for each and every video I do here, I'm recording this while live streaming, filmed in front of a live studio audience. Abalasiel Broadcasting Corporation. I got an email from an old friend, somebody who knew me when I was a teenager. And, different questions came up in, of course, this conversation. I was asked, simply or not so simply, how is it that languages, the study of languages, has become such a huge thing in my life? Given that, I was not interested in these things at all when I was a child, nor when I was a teenager. Good question, and it's a question not that many people could ask me. And I could answer this in a number of different ways. The most efficient way for me to answer it is actually to talk about the importance of evaluation in university education in Canada. Now, evaluation ultimately means what kind of grade you get, whether you get an A or a B or a C, and how they decide the difference between an A or a B or a C. But it shapes mass education in a much more profound way. Evaluation relates to what job skills you're actually learning, if any, what real-world skills you're learning and being tested on in university. Evaluation shapes the way the lectures are given, the way the assignments are handed out and collected, and so on. Are you being graded on how well you can write an essay? Are you being graded on how well you can repeat back to the professor's own opinions, as stated in class? Are you being graded on how well you can take notes on things stated to you verbally in class and then later reproduce those same ideas on a final exam? I don't mean this overly cynically. I really mean this in a broad and open-ended way. However, my experience with university education in Canada was incredibly negative. And I found myself in a situation in every department I looked at, whether it was politics, anthropology, history, a whole bunch of different disciplines in the humanities. I found myself in a situation where all of these departments were, on the one hand, not providing me with any possible career path, no actual job skills, no useful training, but they were also grading me almost entirely on my ability to flatter people, on my ability to flatter the professor, on my ability to repeat back opinions the professor wanted to hear, primarily the opinions given in class, or pointed out in the textbook and assigned readings or what have you. And I had a lot of, it was something I figured out relatively early in my university education, but bitterly I had to be reminded of again and again. I had one kind of crushing experience after another. I remember once, University of Toronto, these were all big classes, so you'd write essays or exams, and they wouldn't even be graded by the professor, they'd be graded by some teaching assistant. And I remember I wrote one on the politics of Canada's possible separation from Quebec. So the political possibility that Quebec would separate from Canada. And I wrote this quite intelligent little essay. This is an in-class, exam, so you're not citing sources, but you're writing an essay without footnotes, so to speak. I made a series of points about how the way Quebec perceives the United States and how they imagine their own foreign policy if they became an independent country, because as soon as they separate from Canada, then they need to sign a free trade agreement with the United States. Suddenly they're independent, alliances, so to speak, their relationship with the United States. They'll be living in the shadow of the United States much more directly as soon as they get out from under the shadow of Canada. So I wrote about it as a sort of three-way, as a diplomatic triangle, if you like. It was a slightly original thought. And the person creating the essay said, look, this is really very intelligent, but it's not repeating back the points that were in the textbook or the lectures, so I can't give you an A. And that wasn't the question. The question was something like, explain Quebec's shifting, explain the ambivalent and shifting perspective of Quebecers on the possibility of independence during these few decades. And I did that by saying, well, during these decades, what really changed was not the way the Quebecois perceive English-speaking Canadians, but how they perceived Americans, because American form. So it was an intelligent essay. But that's only one example. But that really does get to the crux of the matter. I was in courses, and I got to say this about political science as a discipline. I think it's true of several other disciplines. But political science is an example of a discipline where if you are not keeping it all the way real, if you are not being 110% honest, then it's worthless. Then it's garbage. You can't really have the discipline of political science. Political science is discipline without discipline. You can't ask those questions unless you're really open to hearing more than one answer. You can't ask those kinds of questions, engage in those discussions in the classroom, in the lectures, in the assigned readings. What you need to do in political science requires a very, very high level of scrutiny, self-discipline, self-awareness, self-criticism, honesty. Honesty above all else. Because otherwise it's just propaganda, right? Otherwise it's the study of propaganda. And many, many times I have pointed out that my professors were wrong. Sometimes in class, sometimes after class, sometimes in private discussion. Many, many times I've pointed out that my professors were factually wrong about important issues, in history. Where I was able to present, come back to the next class with statistics and say, look, you claimed this last class. Here are the actual numbers, whatever it is. And it's not easy on the ego of the professor. So that discipline itself is especially sensitive to this. But I know lots of other people in other parts of the humanities, people who were in English literature or French literature or anthropology or history or what have you. And they had a lot of the same experiences where they at some point or another had the crushing realization, what I'm being evaluated on here is, one, totally subjective, two, totally counterproductive for me as a student. It isn't teaching me job skills. It isn't training me to be good at something. It's not even training me to be good at writing essays. It's not training me to be good at delivering lectures myself or doing original research. See, original research, that for me was another turning point, was when I really understood what is original research, and then the role of translation, the role of learning languages in original research. That was another turning point. That came pretty late in my university education. But basically, university education in Canada was so terrible, and I couldn't do any of the things I wanted to do, and the whole system of evaluation, the content of what I was being taught was garbage, the way it was being evaluated was garbage, and the way it was being evaluated influenced all the other elements of the experience, of what the discipline is, of what the diploma means, and so on. This is a disaster, no matter where I looked. And what I figured out was languages are not like that. If I write an exam for learning Chinese or learning ancient Greek or learning Pali or Sanskrit or Cree or Ojibwe or Cambodian, I saw the discipline of learning languages as the one element of university education that was not entirely corrupted by postmodernism or just corrupted by the laziness and self-indulgence of who professors are and how they want to make money and what academia had become in Canada. I should throw in a caveat here real quick. I didn't work in the Department of Astronomy or Agriculture or Architecture. All of them start with the letter A. I also didn't work in zoology. I had nothing to do with. There were all kinds of other disciplines, including the pure sciences and math. Where what I've just said may not be true at all. Maybe the Department of Theoretical Mathematics is just wonderful at University of Toronto. I have nothing to do with that. I'm only talking about the departments I had experience with, but I did have experience with a great many departments, including, of course, also religious studies. Everything I've just warned you about political science, it can be even worse in religious studies. This question of, are you actually doing original research? Are you actually learning something useful for you as a student, for you in your career path? Or are you just coming to a classroom where your point is to figure out the bizarre and quite possibly eccentric beliefs of your professor and then repeat back to that professor what they want to hear, which may not be what you believe, but in any case, what is it going to teach you? What do you learn from that? What, after 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars, what actually do you learn from that process in religious studies? And believe me, that can be even worse in Buddhism than it is in Christianity or Judaism. I have a lot of experience linked to Buddhist studies and, of course, now East Asian studies, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, came to a point where I thought I'm interested in a form of education where the evaluation is based on objective criteria. When you sit down to write that exam, whether it is in Cree or Chinese or Cambodian, either your answer is right or it's wrong. And the question is not how much can you flatter the professor or how much do you happen to agree with the professor's point of view, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to know about that. So within, the various kind of missions I had in life, the kind of mandate or ethical interests I had, whether you're talking about the humanitarian impulse I have, wanting to do humanitarian work, the political impulses I have, or indeed the interest that drew me towards study of Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, or philosophy in general, European philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, etc., or that drew me towards First Nations, their politics, their languages. In every case, I wanted to be on the hard linguistic side of that field of study. I did not want to be writing exams or having disputes with professors that were based on their personal religious convictions. I wanted to be able to establish my own authority in the field by doing original research that could be evaluated and valued, could be recognized as being original and important because of its basis in language, its basis in field work, its basis in politics, history, facts, fact, all objective facts. Whether you're talking about the objective facts in the study of history and politics or the objective facts in language and original research, new translations, et cetera, et cetera. That was where I wanted to be. Real quick anecdote on that. I knew a guy with a PhD, and he delivered a paper at a conference. There are only 4 people in the audience of this conference, which is very common. So he delivers this paper. There's basically one professor of Theravada Buddhism there. I know who the professor is, and I think he's an idiot. But anyway, that's also a problem with academia. You get one bad egg or one bad apple in a position of power, and they hold on to it for decades, and the field can't move forward until they retire or drop dead. Anyway, so he gives his presentation, which was about the meaning of a particular word in Pali. He was arguing that this word really does not mean meditation. I agree with him with a particular word, and he was giving examples where the meaning of the word was totally unrelated to meditation, including where the meaning of the word was a list of things in a summary. So this is a purely linguistic argument as to the etymology and the usage, and he's quoting passages, and he's got the overhead projector, and he's showing these examples where this word has some other meanings that would maybe challenge, And at the end of his presentation, it's not like there's a huge audience applauding. There are 4 people there or something. And the senior professor sitting there says, "Oh, that's a very interesting presentation, but that's impossible." And the guy just said that it was his religious conviction that this word had this one meaning. So any new linguistic research, the facts of the case were irrelevant to his faith. And believe me, you can go through peer review that's like that too, and so on and so forth. So look, the strength of languages and a language-based approach to research, whether it's philosophy or politics or religion or history or whatever you want to say. When I was getting involved with the Cree and the Ojibwe, I'm white, in case you hadn't noticed. Or you can say I'm Jewish if you don't count Jewish people as white. Matter of perspective. I have absolutely no link by blood or heritage or upbringing to the Cree and the Ojibwe. I just had the misfortune to be born in Canada, and thus I'm part of the legacy of the British Empire colonialism that's destroyed their civilizations and languages. How am I going to make a positive contribution in that field, in that struggle? It's not going to be because I'm charming. You're not going to charm your way into those communities. And for me, it's not going to be because I sing and dance. Some people it is. Some people get involved with the arts within First Nations community. You're a great, literally, you're a great singer, and you do live gigs. You can do concert tours in First Nations communities, in remote, reservations and what have you. You can charm your way in. You can get involved by being an entertainer, by being a musician or a dancer or something like that. Sure. Or by being a patron of the arts. You maybe are someone who buys First Nations sculpture, art, someone who sets up concerts and traditional dance competitions. Sure, there are people who get involved all those ways. And there are people who get involved because they're oil executives, right? For me, a way to have something that's objectively evaluated on objective criteria, as I say, where the evaluation for me as a student, I can prove that I'm a scholar or that I'm a good student or whatever that I have something to contribute, where it's verifiable, the only way I saw to do that was through the language. And frankly, that's the same thing I'd say about the Cambodians. I used to say this to people all the time, whether it's Cambodians or Laotians in Southeast Asia, look, I wasn't born here, I have no connection to this place, I have no right to do humanitarian work here. So how are you going to get your foot in the door? It's not going to be because I'm charming. I always reminded people who are doing humanitarian work, like in Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, I'd say, look, never forget, these people didn't invite you here. It's very, very important to remember. I mean, unless they did invite you. If you're actually on a Cree reservation because the Cree invited you there, you're in Laos because a lot of people invite you, that's different. But most of us show up uninvited. And for me, the fact that, like when I sat in Laos, Cambodia, even here in Yunnan, I had handwriting in the local language. I had excellent handwriting in Laotian. I also had handwriting in the ancient scriptural language in Pali. And people were blown away by that. And right away, that opened doors for me. Oh, wow. You had the level of commitment to really study our language, to really study reading and writing our language. Wow. now you're welcome. We're inviting you in. We want to talk to you. And literally, it would change the political discourse. Even if you were talking about sensitive political issues, suddenly people feel they can trust you. They see you've got a level of commitment and engagement to them, their language, their culture, their history. And in my case, it was both ancient history and modern history. I was doing the ancient language. It would be like if you're in some part of Europe and you're showing you both know ancient Greek and modern Greek, or ancient Latin and modern Romanian. I was both doing Pali and in the modern languages of Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, etc. So that's something that's objectively real, that shows my value as a scholar, much realer than having a PhD, frankly, and that opened doors and establishes my place politically, my opportunity to think positive. And I worked for a relatively short time on Korean Ojibwe, but I saw that happen too. When I sat down with First Nations people, and I could show them either in my handwriting or just in speech, I could just talk to them and show the little bit I could speak Cree, Nihiawiwan, it completely changes the way they perceive me. Although they do. They perceive me as a white man. They perceive me as an outsider, which is quite right. And I'm not pretending to be an insider, but I'm an outsider who can demonstrate that level of engagement, commitment, etc. I'm already a white man who's proven to them, I really care about you and your history and your politics. I really care about hearing your voice. I'm not just here to preach to you, whether that's preaching political solutions, preaching politics, or in the Buddhist context, preaching Buddhism. I'm really here to listen to you, and I care so much about your perspective that I've put in the hard work to do your language. So yeah, politically, that's crucial. Great. So this is a short story long at this point, but yeah, if the quality of education in Canada were better, I would have never gotten on that path. It was really because of the appallingly poor quality of education at the University of Toronto, in every department I was ever in, also at a number of other universities in Canada that I've been involved with, appallingly low. I felt that left me no better alternative, no other alternative I could see aside from going into language education and trying to make languages, the platform for my political engagement, my philosophical engagement, my humanitarian engagement with the world. And I was hoping it could also be a platform for my career. It's utterly failed at that. So you can see my other videos. Still today, it's a wide open question of how it is in this life I'm ever going to own a living. How it is in this life I'm ever going to earn a living. Hit me up.